That morning, as the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, I was kneeling in the most important chapel in Rome. I was 23 years old, a young nun full of faith, and the man who had gotten me pregnant was Monsignor Dario Salvatici, the most respected spiritual counselor in the Vatican. But what I didn't know yet was that my story would become the spark that would forever change the rules of the church. And what happened afterwards, my silent revenge that took me 20 years to accomplish, is something no one expects. Stay until the end, because I promise you that good wins, always. Before continuing, though, I want to ask you something. If this story is already touching you, if you feel it's important to listen all the way through, do 3 things for me right now. First, leave a like. Not later now. Second, subscribe to the channel because every week I tell true stories that the church doesn't want you to hear. And third, stay until the end because what I managed to achieve after 20 years of planning will leave you speechless. I promise you an ending where those who suffered get justice, where those who lied pay the price, where a young betrayed nun becomes the woman who changes the system from within. So don't leave. My story is about to begin, and believe me, it's worth every second. My name is Alessia Martelli. Today, I'm 43 years old. But when it all started, I was only 22 and still believed that the church was a place of sanctity and truth. How naive I was. How naive we all were. I grew up in a small town near Siena. A normal family, not particularly religious, but my grandmother was very devout. Every Sunday she took me to church, told me stories of saints and martyrs, told me that serving God was the highest calling a woman could have. When I was 17, during a spiritual retreat, I felt what I believed was the calling, a deep sensation, almost physical, that told me my place was in the church, that I should dedicate my life to God. My parents weren't happy. They wanted me to study, to get married, to have a normal life. But I was determined. And at 19, against their wishes, I entered the convent of Santa Caterina in Rome. The first years were wonderful: prayer, the study of theology, contemplative silence. I felt at peace. I felt I was in the right place. Then, in the 3rd year of my novitiate, I met him. Monsignor Dario Salvatici. He was 46 years old. Handsome in a classic way, like those Italian cinema actors from the 60s. Dark hair just graying, intense hazel eyes, a deep voice that when he spoke seemed like a caress. But it was especially his spiritual authority that fascinated. He was considered one of the most brilliant theologians of his generation. He had written 3 books on Christian mysticism. He was personal advisor to 2 cardinals. He came to our convent to give a series of conferences on religious vocation. I was chosen as one of his assistants. I had to prepare the rooms, organize materials, take notes during lessons. The first time we spoke alone was after a particularly intense conference on the meaning of divine love. "Sister Alessia," he called me while I was tidying chairs. "Yes, Monsignor?" "I noticed how you took notes. Very attentive, very precise. Have you studied theology?" "Only the basic courses, Monsignor. But I'm very passionate about it. It shows. You asked questions during the lesson that show a sharp mind. Rare for someone so young." He made me blush. "Thank you, Monsignor. Call me Dario. When we're just the 2 of us, we don't need so much formality. But you're a Monsignor, and you're a soul walking toward God. We're equal before him, no?" He smiled, and I felt special, seen, appreciated. That was the beginning. In the following weeks, our conversations became more frequent, more personal, more intimate. He asked me about my life, my doubts, my fears, and I, stupidly, opened my heart to him. He told me he saw enormous potential in me, that I had a special gift for spiritual understanding, that I could become a great theologian if only I had the right guidance. And that guidance, naturally, was him. He began inviting me to private study sessions, in his office in the Vatican, always with the door open, always very proper, at least at first. We studied medieval mystics, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, mystical ecstasy, the union of the soul with God. And slowly, very slowly, the conversations began to change. Love for God, he told me, is the highest form of love. But it's also a love that manifests itself through human love. The mystics knew this. Saint Teresa described it in almost sensual terms. I listened, fascinated and confused. Divine love, he continued, is total. It involves the body as much as the soul. Separating them is an error of the modern church, a misunderstanding of the true nature of spirituality. But we've taken vows of chastity, I said uncertainly. The vow of chastity, he answered with that hypnotic voice, concerns not binding oneself to a single human being in an exclusive way, but love that transcends the body. Love that is a manifestation of the divine, that can never be wrong. They were beautiful words, sophisticated words, words that seemed to make sense in that context of mystical theology and spiritual philosophy. And I, young and naive, began to believe him. After about 3 months of these sessions, one evening the inevitable happened. We were studying a passage by St. Teresa where she describes mystical ecstasy. Dario was reading aloud, with that deep voice of his. "The angel pierced my heart with a lance of fire," he read. The pain was so great that it made me moan, but at the same time it was so sweet that I never wanted it to end. He raised his eyes from the book and looked at me. "Do you understand what she means, Alessia? Do you understand how the experience of the divine is as physical as it is spiritual?" "I think so," I whispered. He got up from his chair and came toward me. He knelt beside my chair, took my hands. "I feel there's a special connection between us. A connection that goes beyond mentor and student. It's as if God brought us together for a higher purpose." My heart was beating so hard, I feel the same, I admitted. And before I could understand what was happening, he kissed me. It was sweet, delicate, and I, who had never been kissed in my life, felt myself melting. "This," he whispered, "is as sacred as any prayer, perhaps more sacred, because it's true. It's real. It's God's love manifesting through us." And I believed him. God forgive me, I believed him completely. That night, I returned to the convent in a state of total confusion. I was upset but also exalted. I felt special, chosen, loved in a way no one could understand. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We saw each other more and more often, always in his office, always late in the evening when everyone had gone. And each time we went a little further, he told me that what we were doing was a form of prayer, a spiritual communion that also needed the body to be complete. He told me that the great mystics had always known this, that the Church had repressed this truth for centuries. He told me I was special, that only pure souls like mine could understand this higher dimension of spirituality, and I drank every word of his as if it were gospel, until the evening when everything changed completely. It was December. We had just finished what he called a deep meditation session. I was on his sofa getting dressed with trembling hands. He was at the window looking at the illuminated dome of St. Peter's. "Dario," I said with an uncertain voice, "I have a doubt. Tell me, if this is so sacred, so right, why do we have to keep it secret? Why can't we tell anyone?" He turned toward me. His expression had changed, colder. "Because the world isn't ready for this truth. Because people would misunderstand. They would see sin where there's sanctity. They would see transgression where there's transcendence. But I feel guilty. I feel like I'm betraying my vows." "Are you the one betraying, Alessia? Or are they the ones who misunderstood what it means to serve God? I don't know what to think anymore." He came closer, took my face in his hands. "Listen to me carefully. What we have is rare, precious, but also fragile. If you speak about it with anyone, if you even hint at it, I'll be destroyed. My career, my reputation, everything. And you'll be thrown out of the convent. Your family will disown you. Everyone will think you're a seductress who tempted a priest. But I didn't tempt anyone. Who will believe you? I'm a respected Monsignor. You're a 23-year-old novice. Who do you think people will believe?" His words were like ice, but he was right. Who would believe me? "So," he continued with a softer voice, "we must protect our secret, for the good of both of us, for the good of what we're building together. Understand?" I nodded. Even though something inside me had broken, that was the first time I felt fear, the first time I understood that perhaps I had made a mistake, but it was too late. A month later, in January, I missed my period. At first I thought it was stress, then I missed the second month too, and the third. Finally, with my heart in my throat, I took a pregnancy test. Positive. I stayed in the bathroom for an hour, staring at those 2 pink lines, unable to move, unable to think. I was pregnant. I was a pregnant nun, and the father was a Monsignor of the Vatican. My life was over. When I finally found the courage to tell him, his reaction was chilling. "Are you sure?" he asked with a flat voice. I took 3 tests, all positive. Silence. Long, heavy. "I understand," he said at last. That's all? I understand. What do you want me to say, Alessia? I don't know. Maybe that you're sorry? That you'll help me? That we'll face this together? He laughed. A bitter laugh, devoid of joy. Face it together? And how exactly do you propose we do that? Do you think we can go out hand in hand and announce to the world that a Monsignor got a novice pregnant? I don't know. But I can't do this alone. You're not alone. I'll help you. But in my way. What does that mean? It means I know a place, a special convent where they send nuns who find themselves in this situation. There you can carry out the pregnancy away from prying eyes. After birth, the baby will be given up for adoption to a good family. The baby? Our child, you mean? His gaze hardened. Alessia, you have to be realistic. There is no our child. There's a problem that needs to be solved in the most discreet way possible. His words were knives. You said you loved me. You said what we had was sacred, and it was. But now the situation has changed. We have to be practical. Practical? Practical? We're talking about a life. About our child. Lower your voice, he hissed, looking around even though we were alone. And stop saying our child. That baby is an accident, a mistake. And it will be handled as such. I couldn't believe this was the same person who had whispered words of love to me just weeks before. I'm not going to any convent, I said, finding a strength I didn't know I had. And I'm not giving away my child. Then what will you do? He asked challengingly. Will you go to the Mother Superior and tell her you're pregnant? Will you tell her who the father is? And then what? You'll be thrown out. Without money, without a home, without a family that will welcome you, and with an illegitimate child to raise. Is that what you want? Tears of anger and desperation ran down my face. You manipulated me. You made me believe what we were doing was right. And now you're abandoning me like I'm nothing. I didn't manipulate you. You wanted what happened as much as I did. And now you have to face the consequences of your choices. My choices? You were the one in a position of power. You were the one who was supposed to guide me. You were the one who was supposed to be responsible. Enough, he said with an icy voice. You have two options. Either you go to the convent I indicated and solve this problem discreetly, or you go to the Mother Superior and tell everything. But if you choose the second option, know that I'll deny everything. I'll say you're the one who seduced me, that you developed an obsession with me, that you invented this pregnancy to attach yourself to me. You wouldn't dare. Try me. And in that moment, I understood. I understood that the man before me had never been who I thought. He wasn't a spiritual guide. He wasn't a man of God. He was just a manipulator, a liar, a coward. I left his office that day with my heart in pieces, but also with a new determination. I wouldn't let him destroy me. I wouldn't let him silence me. But I was also realistic. He was right about one thing. If I spoke, no one would believe me. He was powerful, respected, connected. I was nobody. So I had to be smart. I had to be patient. I had to plan. I went to the convent he had indicated, not because I wanted to obey him, but because I needed time to think, time to understand what to do. The convent was located on an isolated hill in Umbria. It was run by an order of elderly nuns who seemed more like prison guards than religious women. There were 12 of us young pregnant nuns, all with the same story, all manipulated by priests or monsignors, all abandoned, all silenced. At night, when the elderly nuns slept, we gathered and spoke in whispers. We shared our stories, and we discovered they were all terribly similar. There was Beatrice, 24, made pregnant by her confessor. There was Laura, 26, manipulated by the rector of the seminary where she worked. There was Marta, only 21, taken advantage of by the priest from her town, who had convinced her to enter the convent. 12 women, 12 stories, 12 lives destroyed by the system. And it was there, in those nights of whispered sharing, that my plan was born. I began taking notes, names, dates, details. Every story, every particular. The others were frightened at first. Alessia, what are you doing? Asked Beatrice. If they discover us, we're finished. I'm documenting, I answered. I'm collecting evidence, because one day when the time is right, I'll use these stories to change the system. You're crazy, said Laura. You can't fight the church. I'm not fighting the church. I'm fighting the corrupt men who betray it. It won't do any good, said Marta bitterly. We're nobody. No one will ever listen to us. Maybe you're right, I admitted. Maybe no one will listen today, but I'm 23 years old. I have my whole life ahead, and I swear on this baby I'm carrying that one day, somehow, I'll get justice. For me, for you, for all of us. I didn't know then how long it would take me. I didn't know how much pain I would still have to endure. But that promise, made in a dark room of a prison convent in Umbria, would become the mission of my life. My son was born in April, a beautiful baby boy with dark eyes like his father's. I held him in my arms for exactly 2 hours. Then the nuns took him away. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply watched as they took my son away, and I swore to myself that one day I would find him, and I would tell him the truth, the whole truth. They told me he had been adopted by a family in Milan. No other details. No name. No address. 2 weeks after giving birth, they sent me to another convent, in Sicily, as far as possible from Rome, from everything I knew. But I didn't give up. I spent the next 3 years in that convent working as a teacher in the orders school. By day, I smiled, prayed, taught children. By night, I studied. I studied canon law. I studied the structure of the church. I studied how power worked within the Vatican. And I continued collecting stories. Every time I met a nun with that empty look, that look I knew too well, I talked to her. And if she opened up, I added her story to my secret collection. In 3 years, I collected 27 stories. 27 women damaged by the system. Then, when I was 26, I made a radical decision. I left the convent. I didn't flee. I left officially. I asked to be dispensed from my vows. The Mother Superior was surprised. Sister Alessia, are you sure? You have such a strong vocation. Not anymore. I lied. I've lost my faith. They let me go. Officially, I was free, but my mission had just begun. I returned to Rome. I found work as a secretary in a law firm. I rented a room in a working-class neighborhood, and I began phase 2 of my plan. I enrolled in university, law school. I specialized in ecclesiastical law. I studied by day. I worked in the evening. I slept little. But I was motivated by something stronger than tiredness. In the next 5 years, I graduated with top marks. Then I did a master's in canon law. Then I began working as a lawyer, specialized in cases involving the church. But I wasn't just a lawyer. I was an infiltrator, a spy, a hunter. Every case I took, every church where I worked, every convent I visited, I looked for other stories, other victims, other evidence, and I found them. Oh God, how many I found? In 10 years, I collected 123 documented testimonies of nuns who had been manipulated, made pregnant, and then silenced by the system. 123 women, 123 children given away, 123 destroyed lives, but I still didn't have solid enough evidence. I had testimonies, yes, but testimonies from women who were afraid to speak openly, testimonies that could be easily contested. I needed more. I needed official documents, irrefutable proof, and so I waited. I worked. I built my reputation as a competent and discreet lawyer. I became a trusted presence in ecclesiastical circles, and I waited for the right moment. It came when I was 36, 13 years after my son's birth. I was assigned to handle an inheritance case for a diocese in northern Italy. The work required access to diocesan archives. And there, hidden among dusty documents, I found gold, secret files, letters, transfer documents, medical certificates, silence agreements signed under duress, decades of cover-up documented in meticulous detail. And among those documents, I found something even more precious. A list of priests and monsignors who over the years had been quietly transferred after getting nuns or laywomen pregnant. 57 names, including some bishops, including 2 cardinals, and at the top of the list, written in faded but still legible ink, Monsignor Dario Salvatici, with annotations, 3 documented cases, recommended discreet transfer, no formal disciplinary action, 3 cases. I hadn't been the only one. There had been 2 others before me, and probably others after. I made copies of everything, of every single document, of every single page. And then I waited more. Because I knew that if I acted too soon, if I exposed everything immediately, the church would have the time and resources to do damage control, to intimidate the victims, to make evidence disappear. I had to wait for the perfect moment. The moment when public opinion was already sensitized. The moment when the church could no longer simply bury everything. That moment came in 2018, When similar scandals began emerging in other countries, when the international press began pressing for reforms, when even the Pope spoke of the need to address these problems, it was time. I was 41. 18 years had passed since my son's birth. 18 years of planning. 18 years of collecting evidence. 18 years of waiting for the right moment. I contacted an investigative journalist from a major international newspaper. Her name was Elena Ricci. She had written several courageous articles on church problems. I sent her a selection of the documents I had collected. Just a selection. A taste. The following week, I was in her office in Milan. "This material," she said, looking at me with wide eyes, "is explosive. If it's all authentic, it's all authentic. And I have much more material. Names, dates, testimonies, official documents, everything. How many victims? 123 that I personally documented. But I suspect there are many more. And you? Are you one of the victims?" "Yes. Monsignor Dario Salvatici. 18 years ago, I was 23. Are you willing to make your story public?" I hesitated. This was the question I had asked myself 1,000 times in the last 18 years. "Yes," I finally said. "I'm ready." In the following months, Elena and I worked together. We verified every single detail. We contacted the victims I had managed to trace. Many were still too afraid, but 32 found the courage to speak. 32 women who told their stories, with names, with surnames, with verifiable details. The article was published in March. Front page. With a title I'll never forget, 123 Nuns. The secret the Church has hidden for decades. The reaction was apocalyptic. The Vatican immediately released a statement calling the article defamatory and based on unverified accusations, but it was too late. The story was out, and other newspapers, other television stations, other media picked it up. In 1 week, we were everywhere. All over the world, they were talking about us. And then the other victims, those who had been afraid, began to come forward. By the dozens. By the hundreds. Monsignor Dario Salvatici was immediately suspended from his functions. An investigation was opened. He denied everything. Naturally. He said I was a disturbed woman with a pathological obsession with him. He said the other women were liars seeking attention or money, but this time he had underestimated something. He had underestimated that I had spent 18 years preparing for this moment. I had documents, I had evidence, I had witnesses, and above all, I had DNA. Because yes, in all those years I had never stopped looking for my son, and 3 years earlier I had found him. His name was Marco. He was 15. He lived with a loving family in Milan who didn't know who the biological father was. I didn't tell him who I was, not then. But with a legal excuse, I managed to obtain a sample of his DNA. And I kept it. Waiting for the right moment. That moment had arrived. When Monsignor Salvatici publicly denied ever having touched me, I released a statement. I had an 18-year-old son, and I had his DNA, and I was willing to do a paternity test. The Vatican panicked. Monsignor Salvatici suddenly stopped denying so categorically. He began talking about past mistakes, moments of weakness. The test was done, under legal supervision, with independent witnesses. Result, 99.9% probability that Dario Salvatici was Marco's biological father. His career was finished in 1 day. He was defrocked, removed from all his positions. He became an ordinary man from 1 day to the next. But my revenge wasn't over, because I didn't just want to destroy him. I wanted to change the system that had allowed men like him to act for decades without consequences. Using the documents I had collected, I helped build legal cases against the church in 12 different countries. Not for money, for structural changes. Specific demands, mandatory protocols for complaints, independent tribunals to investigate accusations, economic and psychological support for victims, abolition of forced silence agreements. It took 3 years of legal battles. But in the end, in 2021, the Vatican announced significant reforms. Not perfect, not enough, but a beginning. They created an independent office to receive and investigate complaints. They allocated funds to support victims. They officially prohibited silence agreements. Small steps, but steps in the right direction. And me? I finally could face my son. Marco was 21 when I officially contacted him. His adoptive parents now knew the whole story. The press had told everything. We met in a cafe in Milan. I was terrified. What would he say to me? Would he hate me? Would he reject me? He sat across from me, tall, handsome, with those dark eyes I recognized so well. "So," he said, "you're my biological mother." "Yes." "And that man, the Monsignor, was my father?" "Yes." Long silence. "Why did you only look for me now?" I told him everything. The whole story, without omitting anything. When I finished, there were tears in his eyes. And in mine. "You spent 18 years planning this revenge," he said slowly. 18 years to get justice. For me. For all those women. Not just for revenge, I said. For change. So it wouldn't happen again. He nodded slowly. "My parents, the ones who raised me,
They're my
are
real
wonderful
family.
people." "I know. I don't want to take you away from them, but," he continued, "I think there's room in my life for you too. If you want." We cried together. And for the first time in 18 years, I felt something that resembled peace. Today, 2 years later, I have a relationship with my son. I'm not his mother in the traditional sense. That's the woman who raised him, who loved him, who was there for him every day. I'm something different. A friend, a mentor, someone who's part of his life in a unique way. Monsignor Dario Salvatici, the man who manipulated and abandoned me, now lives in a small apartment in the suburbs, without power, without prestige, without anything he had. I don't feel joy seeing him like that. Only a deep sadness for all the waste. But the real victory isn't his fall. The real victory is what we built from the ruins. I founded an organization called Free Voices that offers legal and psychological support to religious women who have suffered manipulation. In 3 years, we've helped more than 200 women. Many of the 123 women from my original testimonies have rebuilt their lives. Some stayed in the church in more open and modern orders. Others left and found peace elsewhere. But all found a support community. All know they're not alone. Beatrice, the first woman I met in that prison convent 18 years ago, now works with me in the organization. She's become my best friend. Laura got married and has 3 children. We see each other every month for coffee. Marta became a psychologist specialized in trauma. She helps other victims to heal. And the 12 women from that convent in Umbria? We're still in contact. We meet once a year on the anniversary of my first meeting with them. We celebrate our survival. We celebrate the fact that good has won. Because this is the most important lesson of my story. Evil may seem powerful. It may seem invincible. But if you're willing to be patient, strategic, determined, good can win. It took me 18 years. 18 long years of pain, planning, waiting. But in the end, the truth came out. Justice was done. The system changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but it changed. And this is what I want you to understand if you're listening to this story. If you're a victim of manipulation, know that you can get out. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but you can make it. You don't have to take revenge like I did. You don't have to plan for 18 years, but you must speak. You must seek help. You must know you're not alone. And if you're someone who has seen something wrong and don't know whether to speak, remember my story. Remember that silence protects only the guilty. Remember that every voice that rises makes it harder for predators to hide. I was just a 23-year-old girl when all this began, naive, scared, betrayed. But I chose not to remain a victim. I chose to become a fighter. And if I did it, you can do it too. Good wins. Not always immediately, not always easily, but it wins. This is my testimony. This is my truth. This is my story of pregnancy, betrayal, and revenge in the heart of the church. But above all, this is a story of hope, of resilience, of strength. Because in the end, after all the pain, after all the tears, after all the years of struggle, I'm here. Alive. Strong. With my son in my life. With an organization helping other women. With the satisfaction of knowing I made a difference. And you? What's your story? What's your struggle? What's your victory waiting to happen? Write it in the comments. Share your experience, because every story told is a victory against silence. And if this story touched you, if it made you reflect, if it gave you hope, do 3 things. First, share it. Make it reach someone who might need it. Second, subscribe to the channel. Every week I tell stories of people who fought and won. Third, and most important, never be silent in the face of injustice, even if it seems impossible. Even if it seems it won't help. Speak. Act. Fight. because good needs warriors, and you can be one of them. I am Alessia Martelli. I was a young, betrayed nun. I became a lawyer, an activist, a reunited mother. And my story isn't finished. It's only the beginning of something bigger. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having the courage to hear a difficult truth. And remember, good always wins. Always. Now go, and change the world in your own way. But before I leave you, I want to tell you something I've never said publicly. Something that completes this story in a way you perhaps don't expect. 3 years ago, when everything seemed concluded, when the reforms had been approved and my organization was well established, I received an unexpected phone call. It was an elderly woman's voice, trembling. "Are you Alessia Martelli?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Gabriella Salvatici. I'm Dario's sister." The world stopped. Dario's sister. The man who had destroyed me. "What do you want?" I asked with a cold voice. I want to meet you. Please. I know I have no right to ask, but I need to talk to you. Why should I? Because I have something to tell you, something that might give you some peace. Or maybe not. But you need to know. Curiosity prevailed. We met in a cafe in Rome. Gabriella was 72, completely white hair, face marked by suffering. "Thank you for coming," she said when I sat down. "I'm here." "Speak." "My brother died 6 months ago. I didn't know. And honestly, I felt nothing hearing it. He died alone, sick, without friends, without dignity. The last years of his life were hell." She paused, her hands trembling as she held her coffee cup. "Before dying, he gave me something. He made me promise that one day, when I felt ready, I would give it to you." She pulled an envelope from her purse, old, yellowed. "What is it?" "A letter. He wrote it 5 years ago when the scandal exploded, but he never had the courage to send it to you. I don't want to read it. Please. I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for you. Maybe there's something in there you need to hear. Or maybe not. But at least you'll have the choice." I took the envelope with hesitant hands. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter with trembling handwriting. "Dear Alessia, I know I have no right to write to you. I know I have no right to ask your forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable, but as my life collapses around me, as I lose everything I thought was important, I find myself thinking of you, of that 23-year-old girl who believed in me, who gave me her trust, and whom I betrayed in the vilest way possible. For years, I convinced myself that what I was doing was justifiable, that I was a man with weaknesses like everyone, that the women who came to me were consenting. But they were all lies, lies I told myself to not face the truth. The truth is, I was a predator. I used my position of power to manipulate vulnerable young women. I made them believe what we were doing was holy, when it was just selfishness and lust. And when they became pregnant, I abandoned them, as if they were nothing, as if our children were nothing. Our child, Marco. I saw the photos in the newspapers. He's beautiful, he's intelligent, he's good, and he has nothing of me. He has everything of you. When you released the DNA test, when the world knew I was his father, my first reaction was anger. How dare you? How dare you expose me like that? But then, in the sleepless nights that followed, I understood something. You didn't expose me for revenge. You exposed me for justice, for change, for all those women I had damaged. And even if it destroyed me, even if it took everything I had, it was right. It was necessary. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But I want you to know this. What you did, what you built from all that destruction, is extraordinary. You transformed your pain into change, your anger into justice, your suffering into help for others. You're stronger than I'll ever be. You're better than I'll ever be. And our son, even if he'll never know me, is lucky to have you in his life. I'm dying, Alessia, cancer. I have a few months left. And as I leave, the only regret I have isn't having lost power or position. It's not having been the man I should have been. For you, for all the others, for our son. Forgive me or don't forgive me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. But know that in the last hours of my life, I finally understand who I really was, and I hate myself for it. Dario, I finished reading with tears running down my face. Not tears of forgiveness, not tears of compassion, but tears of closure. Because that letter, even though it came from a dead man, even though it didn't change anything that had happened, gave me something I didn't know I needed, the confirmation that I had been right, that it hadn't been my fault, that he knew, in the end, who the monster had been. I looked at Gabriella, who was watching me with eyes full of tears. "Why did you give this to me?" I asked. "Because you also deserve to know that in the end, very late, my brother understood. It didn't excuse him. It didn't change anything. But he understood. Thank you," I said, "for bringing it to me. Do you forgive him?" I thought about it for a long time. "No," I finally said. "I don't forgive him. But I don't hate him anymore either. He's just a man who made terrible choices and paid the price. Nothing more." "It's more than he deserved," she said with a broken voice. "Maybe. But it's all I have to give. We parted that day. We haven't seen each other again. But that letter, which I still keep in a drawer at home, gave me a peace I didn't know I was seeking. Not a peace that comes from forgiveness, but a peace that comes from knowing the story is truly over. And this brings me to the last chapter of this long story. Last year, exactly 20 years after Marco's birth, my organization received official recognition from the Vatican, recognition for our work in helping victims of manipulation within the Church. When I received the invitation to the ceremony, my first reaction was to refuse. How could I accept an award from the same institution that had protected men like Dario for decades? But then I talked with the women in my organization, with Beatrice, Laura, Marta, and all the others. "You have to go," they told me. "Not for them, for us. To show we're here, that we survived, that we won." So I went. The ceremony was held in a Vatican hall. There were cardinals, bishops, monsignors, all in elegant clothes, all smiling, and me, in a simple suit, with my son Marco beside me. When I went up on stage to receive the recognition, I looked at that room full of churchmen, and I saw faces different from those of 20 years before. I saw embarrassment, I saw shame, I saw awareness. Not all, certainly. Some were there only for appearances, but some had really understood. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at that audience and said something I had carefully prepared. "This recognition," I began, "is not for me. It's for the 123 women I documented. It's for the hundreds of others who still haven't spoken. It's for all victims of manipulation who have suffered in silence for too long. I accept this award not as an endpoint, but as a starting point, because the work isn't finished. Reforms have been made, yes, but they must be implemented, monitored, improved. And as long as there's even one woman suffering in silence, as long as there's even one man using his power to manipulate, our work won't be complete. So thank you for this recognition, but don't congratulate me. Congratulate the women who had the courage to speak. Congratulate the victims who became survivors. And above all, commit to ensuring that in 20 years, this organization won't be needed anymore. Because the Church will have truly become a safe place for everyone." There was a moment of silence. Then, slowly, someone began to applaud. And then another, and another. It wasn't warm applause, it was thoughtful applause, aware. But it was a beginning. After the ceremony, a young priest approached me. He couldn't have been more than 35. "Mrs. Martelli," he said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For changing the Church. I entered seminary 5 years ago, and one of the first things they taught us was your story, as an example of what never to do, as an example of why power must always be accompanied by responsibility." Tears came to his eyes. "You saved the vocation of people like me, because you showed us the Church can be better, must be better." I looked at that young priest and saw hope. I saw a new generation that had learned from the tragedies of the past. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, returning home with Marco, I asked him what he thought. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said, "not of the woman who gave birth to me, but of the woman who fought for 20 years to do the right thing. Mom." He had called me Mom. He didn't do it often. Usually he called me Alessia. That word, so simple, so loaded with meaning, made me cry. Because I understood that yes, I had won. Not just against Dario, not just against the system. I had won against silence, against shame, against the idea that victims must remain victims forever. Today, as I tell you this story, exactly 21 years have passed since that pregnancy test in the chapel in Rome. 21 years of struggle, 21 years of pain, but also 21 years of growth, of strength, of victory. My Free Voices organization now has offices in 22 countries. We've helped more than 1,500 women. We've contributed to changing laws in 7 nations. We've trained more than 300 lawyers specialized in these cases. But what I'm most proud of isn't the numbers. It's having demonstrated that change is possible, that a 23-year-old girl betrayed and abandoned can become a force for good. That pain can be transformed into action. That evil, however powerful it may seem, can be defeated. It takes time, it takes strategy, it takes courage, but it can be done. And if I did it, anyone can do it. So this is my last word to you who have listened to the end. Whatever your battle, whatever your wound, whatever injustice you've suffered, don't give up. Don't be silent. Don't let those who hurt you win. Plan, prepare, and when the right moment comes, act. Good wins. Not immediately, not easily, but it always wins. I am Alessia Martelli. I was a young nun betrayed in the heart of the church. I became a lawyer, an activist, a mother, a warrior. And my story is proof that no one is too small to make a difference. No one is too weak to change the world. No one is too damaged to heal and then help others heal. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for having the courage to reach the end. And now go. Live, fight, win. Because the world needs more people like you. More people willing to tell the truth even when it hurts. More people willing to fight even when it seems impossible. More people willing to believe that good, in the end, always wins. Always. And this, my friends, is the end of my story, but it's only the beginning of yours. Go and change the world. I believe in you. As someone, long ago, should have believed in me, but since no one did, I had to learn to believe in myself. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. Believe in yourselves. Love yourselves. Fight for yourselves. And the rest will come. Thank you, and farewell.